What if your own mother decided your boyfriend belonged with your sister? Imagine carefully planning a weekend to blend your worlds, only to discover you were never really the center of that plan. My name is Julia, and I brought the man I love home to meet my traditional Southern family, hoping to take the next step in our relationship. But within one weekend, subtle sabotage, whispered comparisons, and an old bracelet would unravel everything I thought I understood about loyalty. Before we dive into the story, let me know in the comments, have you ever felt like someone in your family wanted your life for themselves? Hit like, subscribe, and stay with me through this journey of silent rivalry, painful clarity, and a family dinner I'll never forget. I used to believe that introductions were the easy part. You smile, you shake hands, you pour iced tea, like everything is effortless. But nothing felt effortless when I brought David home. It was a warm Saturday evening in early spring, the kind where Georgia light turns everything gold just before sunset. My family's farmhouse had seen its share of guests, church potlucks, graduation parties, even a surprise wedding once, but none of them made my stomach twist like this. David, my boyfriend of a year and the person I wanted to build a life with, had never been to my hometown. He was city-bred, efficient, charming, a little too amused by my tales of chicken fried Sundays and my mama's obsession with proper womanhood. And yet, there he was beside me, holding a bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked from the roadside and looking at me like I was the only thing he could see. That moment almost made me believe this was gonna go well. We stepped into the dining room, the centerpiece of my childhood. Wood-paneled walls, the scent of pine polish, and a creaky chandelier that swayed when someone stomped too hard. My mother, Clara, stood at the head of the table in a lavender blouse and pearls that hadn't seen a jewelry box since the Reagan era. She greeted David with the kind of Southern hospitality that makes you forget it's also a kind of weapon. "You must be David," she said, her smile sugary and sharp. Well, don't you clean up nice?" Before I could even introduce him properly, her eyes slid to my younger sister, Melissa, blonde, ballet slender, and effortlessly graceful, even in bare feet. "And Melissa," Clara added, taking her hand in both of hers, "you look exactly like the kind of girl David deserves." The words were coated in honey, but they landed like a slap. David blinked, clearly unsure if he'd just heard what I had. Melissa, of course, blushed demurely and gave a laugh that was a little too soft, a little too knowing. I smiled too, tightly, anchoring myself in a role I knew too well. The older sister, the practical one, the woman who takes things in stride. I told myself Clara was just being Clara, dramatic, overly fond of appearances, always a bit too pointed, but the knot in my stomach refused to loosen. David reached for my hand under the table, and I squeezed it, anchoring myself in his warmth. I reminded myself why we were here. I loved him. I wanted him to know where I came from, even if parts of it made me want to run screaming. And this dinner, I told myself, was just the beginning. David always believed that laughter could fix tension. He had this way of leaning into awkward moments like he was unbothered, charming his way through silences and side eyes like a magician with a deck of well-timed anecdotes. That night, I watched him summon that confidence, like armor. "So, Clara," he began as we sat around the heavy oak table, "this house, did you build it yourselves, or is it a generational gem?" My mother lifted her wineglass delicately, then glanced toward Melissa, who smiled, as if the question were directed at her. "It's been in our family since before the war," Clara said. "But I suppose you mean the civil one." I blinked. The tone wasn't harsh, but it wasn't warm either. David gave a light chuckle. "Of course. Beautiful craftsmanship. You can feel the stories in the walls." That was David. Earnest, generous, trying his best. I felt a swell of pride in him for even attempting. But before he could continue, Clara stood suddenly, lifting the silver-domed tray from the sideboard with a theatrical flourish. "Now," she said brightly, "I may not know much about city life or logistics, a deliberate nod to my job, no doubt, but I do know how to make a dessert a man won't forget." She placed the tray in the center of the table, revealing a bubbling golden peach cobbler, its flaky top crust dusted with cinnamon just the way David had told me he liked it. His eyes lit up. "Wait a second. That smells exactly like the cobbler my grandma used to make when I was a kid. How? Oh, I just have a good ear, Clara said with a wink. Melissa mentioned something about it after flipping through a few of Julia's notes. Isn't that right, sweetheart? I froze. Melissa smiled sweetly, as if her betrayal were nothing more than an innocent curiosity. I was just looking for an old photo, Julia, she said with that sing-song innocence I remembered all too well. Didn't mean to read anything private. I swear. But you did? I said, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. You read my diary? Melissa's smile tightened for half a second, but she recovered effortlessly. It was open on your bed. I didn't realize it was. Of course she didn't mean any harm, Clara cut in, slicing into the cobbler like she was dividing a kingdom. It was actually very sweet. She just wanted to get to know David a little better, that's all. The room tilted slightly, like my chair had suddenly been placed on uneven ground. David glanced at me, unsure whether to laugh or apologize. He had no idea what that diary meant to me. He didn't know that I'd written in it about our late-night talks, our dreams for the future, and yes, his grandmother's cobbler. It was my safe place, my sanctuary. And now it had been raided and served for dessert. I pushed my chair back slowly. Excuse me. I didn't go far, just to the hallway, just long enough to breathe. Through the doorway, I could hear Melissa giggle and ask David if he wanted extra whipped cream. I leaned against the wall, heart thudding. How could something so simple, so southernly polite, feel so strategic? When I returned, Clara was recounting a story from her youth about a boy who'd courted her with sweet potatoes and sonnets. Melissa's eyes sparkled, her arm casually resting on the table near David's glass. I sat down, smiled faintly, and said nothing. But inside, I had a new understanding. This wasn't just a family dinner. This was a test, a performance, and maybe a competition. And somewhere between my open diary and that perfect cobbler, I'd just lost the first round. I've always had a complicated relationship with gifts. Growing up, they weren't just tokens of affection in our house. They were messages. When Mama gave you something, there was always a reason. A comment disguised as kindness, an expectation dressed in a ribbon. So when Melissa appeared beside me after dinner, holding a tiny velvet pouch and wearing that disarming smile she'd perfected since we were kids, I braced myself. I found something in Mama's jewelry box, she said sweetly, her voice low enough to make it feel like a secret. Thought you should have it. It used to be hers. I looked down at the pouch, hesitant. The last time Melissa gave me something unexpectedly, it had been a sweater I'd outgrown, and she'd borrowed without asking. When I took it back, she cried so hard, Mama said I was heartless. Still, I reached out and opened it. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet, softly tarnished, with a small heart-shaped charm barely holding onto its hinge. I recognized it immediately. I'd seen it in old photos from when Mama was about my age, paired with a cream blouse and too bright lipstick. I remember this, I said. She wore it to Aunt Janie's wedding. Melissa nodded. She said it brings good luck and love. I raised an eyebrow. Did she now? MMHMM, she replied, slipping into the chair beside me. I thought maybe it's time you wore it, since you know things with David are getting serious. There was no malice in her voice, just a studied softness that didn't quite reach her eyes. Thank you, I said cautiously, slipping the bracelet over my wrist, or at least trying to. It stopped midway up my hand. Melissa's eyes flickered. I tried again, turning the clasp toward me, but it was no use. It was just a little too tight, not dramatically, not enough to make a scene, just enough to notice. My gaze drifted to her wrist, slender, elegant, untouched by the kind of stress lines I'd earned in my job and my life. That bracelet would have slid on hers like it had been made for it, which it had, clearly. You sure this is for me? I asked quietly. Voice light but firm. She blinked, then tilted her head like she was surprised. Of course. I tried it on just to see if the clasp still worked. Maybe it shrunk? She laughed. Can gold shrink? Only in fairy tales. Her smile faltered, just a crack, but she recovered fast. Well, maybe it's a sign that you're growing into something new. I forced a chuckle and handed it back to her. Maybe I'll just keep it in the pouch for now. It's too pretty to risk stretching. Suit yourself, she said with a shrug, tucking it back into the velvet like a poker player folding a hand that wasn't worth the risk. She stood and walked toward the kitchen, where I could hear David's voice floating softly as he helped Clara with the dishes. I sat there, staring at the now empty chair, wondering what the real gift was. Was it nostalgia, a subtle reminder of who Mama trusted more? Or was it a decoy, something to distract me from the quiet performance happening in the kitchen? I turned the velvet pouch over in my hands and sighed. I didn't need good luck in love. What I needed was to know who, exactly, I was up against. Sunday mornings at Mama's house always felt like a ritual. Coffee brewed strong enough to wake the dead, gospel music low in the background, and biscuits rising in the oven like little clouds of comfort. I'd grown up with that rhythm. It used to ground me. But that morning, the air felt different, like the house itself was holding its breath. I woke up early, still unsettled from the bracelet incident, and wandered into the hallway barefoot. As I approached the kitchen, I heard it. Laughter. Not polite chuckles, not the warm, sleepy giggle of a couple sharing a private joke. This was sharp, belly-deep laughter. David's, followed by Melissa's higher, breathy giggle. The kind she used when she wanted to be noticed. I slowed my steps and peered into the kitchen. There they were. David stood by the sink, drying a mug with a dish towel slung over his shoulder like he belonged there. Melissa leaned against the counter, her hair pulled back, one knee casually brushing the cabinet door, lips curled in that smile she wore when she knew someone was watching. I couldn't hear the joke, but I didn't need to. Her hand lightly tapped his arm as she laughed again. His head tilted toward her like they were old friends catching up, not two people who'd just met last night over peach cobbler and landmines. They didn't see me. Not yet. I should have walked in, should have said something about needing coffee, or asked where the cream went, but I didn't. Instead, I watched, for a moment too long. And then, from behind me, Mama's voice, floating from the dining room like an arrow laced in silk. Melissa always did know how to keep things lively, she said, not bothering to lower her tone. Julia's never been much for that, always nose deep in her work. Not that there's anything wrong with logistics, of course. She let the last word hang, unfinished, like it was a puzzle piece she didn't care to fit. But it's a little dry, don't you think? For someone like David? I turned slowly. She sat at the head of the table with her newspaper folded neatly beside her, not looking at me, like this wasn't for me, but she knew I'd hear it. What do you mean, someone like David? I asked, voice calm but low. She finally looked up, eyebrows arched in innocent surprise. Oh, sweetheart, don't be so sensitive. He just strikes me as someone who needs excitement, spark, something softer. I crossed my arms. And you don't think I'm exciting? Clara gave a laugh that wasn't unkind, but not kind either. You're dependable, focused. That's something to admire. But romance isn't always about systems and spreadsheets. It needs air, imagination. My stomach turned. I knew what she was doing. She wasn't just voicing an opinion. She was planting seeds. Seeds of doubt, of inadequacy. And she wanted them to bloom in front of David. I turned and stepped into the kitchen before I could stop myself. Morning, I said, forcing a brightness into my tone. What's so funny? David looked up, his smile warm but maybe a little sheepish. Melissa was just telling me about the time she tried to make soap in her dorm sink and nearly caused an evacuation. You should have seen her impression of the fire marshal. Melissa giggled again. I was just trying to be holistic. Julia was always the one with the organized chaos. I was more creatively destructive. I nodded slowly, feeling like I'd stepped into a scene that had been rehearsed. Sounds about right, I said, pouring myself some coffee. The mug handle was warm, Melissa's favorite purple one. My usual mug was missing from the drying rack. David handed me the cream without being asked, like he remembered. I took it silently, suddenly aware of how small the kitchen felt. Julia, he said as I turned, your family is wild. I love it. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Yeah, I said. They're unforgettable. We took a walk after brunch, just David and me. Or maybe it was more of a quiet escape. The air outside was cooler than usual, the Georgia sun hiding behind a veil of clouds. I welcomed the gray. David reached for my hand as we strolled past the old barn. Its red paint peeling in strips, like tired wallpaper. My heart had been jittery all morning, bouncing between irritation and something closer to grief. He squeezed my fingers. "You okay?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say it was just family noise, the kind every couple deals with. But the words caught my throat. "Does it feel like everyone in that house is auditioning for something?" I finally asked. He gave a low chuckle. "Your mom could probably run a talent agency if she wanted." I didn't laugh. We stopped near the big oak tree by the fence, where I used to sit and read as a girl, trying to imagine a world where I could be anyone else. My free hand rubbed my arm instinctively, suddenly feeling exposed. "She's been pushing Melissa at you," I said, voice flat. "Hard." David turned toward me, his brows drawn together, earnest and unflinching. "Jules, are you serious? She served your favorite dessert like it was a secret weapon." From my diary. "And that bracelet? It wouldn't even fit my wrist." He sighed and stepped closer. "Okay, first, that cobbler was dangerously good, but not nearly as good as your banana muffins. Second, I didn't ask for any of this. I'm here because I wanted to meet the people who made you who you are." "Maybe you met the wrong people," I muttered. "Julia," he said softly, "look at me. I did. I love that you think 3 steps ahead, that you keep extra napkins in the car and still triple-check flight times. I love that you have a spreadsheet for vacation ideas, but you still laugh when I get lost trying to use a map app." A flicker of warmth pulsed in my chest. "I love your planning, your calm, the way you keep me grounded without ever making me feel like I'm being managed." His voice was quiet now, serious. "I didn't fall in love with you because you're Melissa. I fell in love with you because you're not." It should have been the moment I relaxed into his arms. It should have been the line that soothed the ache in my chest. But instead, I felt that ache twist. Because somewhere deep inside me, I didn't believe him completely. Not because I doubted his heart, but because I'd spent the last 24 hours watching my mother nudge every narrative in a different direction. And Melissa? She didn't need to nudge. She floated through rooms like she owned them, collecting attention the way a flame collects moths. And it wasn't just the cobbler, or the bracelet, or the breakfast banter. It was the way I felt like I was slipping out of focus in my own story. Still, I leaned into him. I let myself rest my head on his shoulder. "Thank you," I whispered. He kissed the top of my head. "Whatever's going on, we'll handle it. Together." I nodded. I wanted to believe that. But as we stood there beneath the oak tree, with birds chattering in the branches above and my mother's voice echoing faintly from the porch, I couldn't shake the feeling that this weekend wasn't about blending our lives anymore. It was about surviving mine. The evening settled over the farmhouse like a wool blanket, thick, scratchy, and stifling. I stood on the back porch alone, watching the fireflies dot the field, like they were trying to spell out a message I couldn't quite read. David was inside helping Melissa with the Bluetooth speaker, or maybe she was helping him. The difference was starting to feel blurry. Clara joined me like a breeze I hadn't asked for. She didn't say a word at first, just handed me a glass of sweet tea and took her place beside me. We stood there in silence, the way 2 women do when they both know a conversation is coming but neither wants to blink first. "I remember when I first met your father," she said eventually. Her voice was softer than usual, almost wistful. "He was terrible at small talk, always checking his watch. But he could fix anything, solid as stone." I sipped my tea, saying nothing. "But even then," she continued, "I knew what he was. Reliable, predictable, practical." She turned to me, eyes narrowing slightly like she was scanning for weakness. "And that's what I thought I wanted." I frowned, unsure where this was going, but certain I wouldn't like it. "It's not a bad thing, Julia," she added. "Being practical, sensible. It makes you dependable, respected." She paused. "But it doesn't always make you magnetic." I stared at her. "Is there a point you're getting to, or should I grab a notepad?" She smiled faintly, the corners of her mouth tight. "David's a lovely man. I can see why you like him. But," I said, my voice clipped. Clara took a slow sip. "But he has this energy about him. He's vibrant, curious, a little reckless even. Reminds me of someone who needs softness around the edges." artistry, whimsy. I didn't need a translator. You mean Melissa? I said flatly. She shrugged, eyes twinkling. I didn't say that. No, but you carved it into the air. Clara reached over and touched my arm like a pastor consoling a parishioner. Sweetheart, I'm not criticizing you. I'm just saying, some people need balance. David might need something more delicate. I pulled my arm back gently, but firmly. You mean someone more like her. Her expression didn't change, and that told me everything. I set the glass down on the porch railing, the condensation leaving a perfect ring on the wood. You know, Mama, I said, I came here thinking this weekend would be about bringing two parts of my life together, sharing something real, but you spent every moment reminding me I don't belong in either one. Her smile flickered, just for a second. Then she looked out over the field like none of this mattered. I only want what's best for you, she said. No, I replied quietly. You want what's familiar, what you can name, and you want control over how it unfolds. She didn't deny it. Inside, the speaker finally connected, and a song I used to love drifted out through the screen door. I didn't even recognize the lyrics anymore. I'm going to bed, I said. Clara nodded, sipping her tea like nothing had happened. Sleep well, darling. As I walked back through the kitchen, I passed David and Melissa on the couch. She was showing him something on her phone, their heads close, a shared laugh rising between them like smoke. I kept walking, but that night, long after the porch light went out and the house settled into silence, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, Clara's words playing on loop, delicate, artistic, soft. I didn't recognize myself in any of those words. But worse, I wasn't sure David did either. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was exhaustion, overthinking born from a house that never let thoughts stay still. The kind of place where conversations were performances and kindness came laced with caution. I told myself to let it go. Just one more breakfast. One more day. The scent of bacon hit me as I reached the bottom stair, familiar and grounding. The sun streamed through the kitchen windows, slicing golden lines across the tile floor like it was trying to hold everything together. And then I saw them. David was crouched beside Melissa at the edge of the kitchen island, one hand gently brushing her hair aside while the other worked at the back of her neck. A delicate silver chain dangled between his fingers. The clasp had come undone, and he was trying to fix it. It was a nothing moment, innocent, brief, but intimate in a way that made my breath hitch. Melissa giggled softly, tilting her head to make it easier for him. You've got surgeon fingers, she said, her voice low. Don't tell my actual surgeon friends that, David replied with a chuckle. I stood frozen for a beat too long, just long enough for Clara to appear behind me with a plate of eggs and a gaze sharp as a needle. Oh, now that's something, she said, barely above a whisper. See how well they work together? The words sliced through me. I turned to look at her. She gave me a smile, a serene, practiced one, then carried the plate to the table as if she hadn't just gutted me. David finally noticed me and smiled. Hey, good timing. Melissa's necklace went rogue. Looks like you handled it, I said, keeping my voice flat. Melissa stood, brushing her hair over her shoulder. He's handy. I'll give him that. David laughed, but I noticed the faint crease in his brow, the one he got when he knew I wasn't laughing with him. I poured myself coffee, deliberately choosing the chipped mug I'd used since high school. Its handle was cracked, its glaze faded, but it was mine. Breakfast unfolded with mechanical politeness. Scrambled eggs, buttered toast, pleasant chatter about weather and neighbors' renovations. But under the table, my knee bounced restlessly, my appetite a distant memory. Clara was all smiles, watching Melissa and David like they were a pair of actors nailing every scene. She asked about his favorite music, about art galleries and music festivals, things she'd never once shown interest in during my childhood. At one point, she reached for the syrup and sighed dreamily. Wouldn't it be lovely to have a musician in the family? I didn't respond. I just stared down at my plate and let the clinking of silverware drown her out. After breakfast, David followed me onto the porch. Are you okay? Fine, I lied, watching a bee flit between the porch railings. He leaned beside me. You've been quiet all morning. It's just been a lot, I said. My family's kind of a whirlwind, he nodded. I'm starting to pick up on that. I looked at him then, really looked. His face was open, concerned, unaware that each kind word felt like a thread pulling tighter. "They love you," I said. "Especially Clara." David chuckled. "Your mom's intense, but I can see where you get your spark." I smiled tightly, because spark wasn't what Clara had seen. She'd seen softness, artistry, a necklace clasp, and a well-timed laugh. And maybe, just maybe, she saw something I was too scared to admit. That in the eyes of my family, Melissa was already slipping into a role I hadn't realized I was auditioning for. Dinner on the final night was roast chicken with rosemary potatoes, Clara's "I cooked with love" signature dish. She hummed as she carved the meat, smiling sweetly every time David passed her another plate or refilled her wine glass. Melissa was in rare form too, laughing too easily, letting her hand linger too long when she passed the butter. The air around the table crackled with everything unsaid. I watched it all like I was outside my own body. Forks clinked, glasses clinked, and somewhere in between, my patience shattered like a porcelain dish on the floor. It started with a simple comment. "So, David," Clara said, patting her cloth napkin on her lap like a queen making proclamations. "Melissa tells me you used to play in a band?" Melissa chimed in immediately, eyes bright. "Yeah, he was in this indie jazz group in college. I found a few tracks on SoundCloud. He's amazing." I blinked. "You looked him up?" Melissa looked surprised by the question. "Of course. I was curious. You mentioned it once in passing, remember?" "No, I didn't," I said slowly, turning to David. "Did I ever talk about your music to Melissa?" He looked between us, confused. "I don't think so." And there it was. The thread I'd been tugging at all weekend finally unraveled. "Wow," I said, my voice low. "So now you're listening to his college recordings? Digging through his history like what? Like you're doing a character study?" Melissa flushed, caught off guard. "Julia, I just wanted to know more about him. I thought that's what family does when someone new is around." "Funny. I don't remember you doing that with my last boyfriend, or the one before that. Maybe they weren't worth the effort," Clara murmured, almost inaudibly, but not quite. I pushed back from the table slowly, my chair scraping against the wood. "You know what? Let's just drop the charade," I said, standing. My voice shook, but not from fear. From months, maybe years, of letting things slide. This weekend hasn't been about meeting my boyfriend. It's been a long, drawn-out audition. A test. A trap. "Julia," David began, but I held up a hand. "No, I need to say this." I turned to Clara. "You spent every minute of this visit trying to rewrite the narrative, undermining me, building Melissa up like she's the obvious choice for someone like David." Clara blinked slowly. "That's not true." "Oh, really? The bracelet that didn't fit me? The cobbler from my diary? The necklace clasp moment? Do you think I don't see what's happening?" Melissa stood too, hands raised as if to calm the room. "Okay, you're taking this too far." "No, Melissa, I'm finally calling it for what it is. You've been playing this flirtation game all weekend, acting innocent while positioning yourself as, what? The better option? That's not what I was doing," she said, voice breaking. "I was trying to be welcoming. You're twisting everything." I looked at her hard, heart pounding. "Then why do you know more about David's college years than I do?" she faltered. I just asked questions." "You never talk about that stuff?" David rose beside me, looking between us with alarm. "Julia, this is escalating." "Because it's been escalating all weekend," I snapped. "And I've said nothing. I've smiled. I've played along. But enough." I turned to Clara, waiting for her to jump in. But she didn't. She didn't defend me, didn't scold Melissa. She just stared at her plate, expression unreadable. "Say something," I said, voice trembling now. Clara lifted her wineglass and took a slow sip. "It's been a long day." That silence said everything. David gently touched my arm. "Let's step outside," but I pulled away. "No, I'm not running away from this one." The room went still. Melissa's eyes were glassy. Clara looked like she was watching theater. And me? I was standing, finally, in the center of a play I never auditioned for, but somehow got cast as the villain in anyway. I walked out then, not in retreat, but in refusal. If they wanted to play house with roles assigned and endings rehearsed, they'd have to do it without me. I couldn't sleep that night. Even after the house fell into silence, I lay in bed with the ceiling fan spinning lazily overhead, mocking me with its steady, predictable rhythm. Unlike the storm turning over in my chest, my thoughts were anything but quiet. David had knocked once, softly, hesitantly, but I pretended to be asleep. I couldn't face him. Not yet. I wasn't sure if I was more afraid of what he'd say or what he wouldn't. Sometime after midnight, I got up. I padded barefoot to the bathroom, needing water, something to fill the hollowness in my throat. I passed Mama's room. Her door was slightly ajar. A sliver of lamplight spilled into the hallway. I should have kept walking, but something tugged at me. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was that part of me that still, foolishly, wanted answers. I stepped quietly into the room. Clara's bed was neatly made, her nightstand drawer slightly open, like she'd been flipping through her notebooks again. She was a list maker, always had been. Grocery list, garden plans, seating charts, even menus 2 weeks before church potlucks. And there it was, a folded piece of floral stationery sticking halfway out, the kind she reserved for family planning. Not the medical kind, but her own strange blend of matchmaking and meddling. I pulled it free. What I saw made my stomach turn. At the top of the page, in Clara's tight cursive, was the heading, David and Melissa Compatibility Notes. Below it, 2 columns. Like a high school pros and cons list, only more precise, more deliberate. Shared interests, music appreciation, nature walks, brunch and travel shows love of animals' temperaments. David, spontaneous, creative Melissa, gentle, intuitive Julia, rigid, methodical, underlined twice. Ideal future pairing traits. 1 dreamer plus 1 empath equals harmony. Avoid pairing with too much logic/structure. My name appeared only twice. Each time, in contrast. In red ink, she'd scribbled, Melissa compliments him. Julia contains him. I sat on the edge of the bed, the paper trembling in my hands. I should have been angry, furious. Instead, I felt numb. Because this wasn't just a mother's opinion. It was evidence. A blueprint. Proof that all those tiny moments, each innocent interaction, each nudge, each smirk, had been orchestrated. This wasn't just about preference. It was design. I folded the paper and slipped it into my pocket. My hands were cold, my breath shallow. Downstairs, I heard the refrigerator hum and a door creak. Someone, maybe David, was awake, but I didn't move. I sat there in Clara's room, surrounded by her linen-scented control, and I thought about every time I'd tried to be the good daughter, the practical one, the planner, the one who didn't need extra attention, and how that very reliability had been weaponized against me. I thought of the bracelet, too small, the cobbler from my diary, Melissa's light touch on David's arm. But this was different. This was calculated. And what chilled me most wasn't the betrayal. It was that deep down, I suspected Clara didn't think she was doing anything wrong. She probably believed she was helping, securing a better match, preserving legacy. I stood slowly, the paper still clutched in my hand. I wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not in this room that had chosen its favorite. Instead, I walked back to my room and locked the door behind me. The plan had changed. I wouldn't leave tomorrow in confusion. I'd leave in clarity. I packed in silence. Each item I folded into my suitcase felt like a surrender. A shirt. A pair of heels I didn't wear once. The book I'd brought to read but never opened. I didn't even bother separating clean from dirty. I just needed out. Dawn hadn't broken yet, but the air in my room felt suffocating. Like the walls had absorbed everything unspoken from the last 2 days and were now pressing it back toward me. The paper was still in my back pocket, Clara's compatibility chart. I hadn't shown it to anyone, not yet. Maybe I didn't need to. Maybe her silence had already said enough. A soft knock came at my door. I ignored it. Then again, firmer. I opened it to find David, still in yesterday's shirt, eyes shadowed with sleeplessness, but steady. "Don't leave yet," he said. "Why not?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "There's not much left for me here." He looked past me at the half-packed suitcase, then back to me. "We need to talk. I think we passed that exit 2 days ago." David exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Look, I've been trying to stay neutral, polite. I didn't want to make waves in your family's pool. But after last night, after everything I've seen, he paused. I can't stay quiet. I didn't speak. I wasn't ready to believe yet. I saw the way Clara looked at Melissa when I was fixing that necklace, he said. I saw the way she flinched when you said the truth out loud. And I kept trying to tell myself I was imagining it, but I wasn't. He stepped inside. I came here this weekend because I wanted to get to know your family. I thought it was just a formality, something we'd laugh about later. But now I get it. You've been fighting for air in this house your whole life, haven't you? I swallowed hard. You don't know what you're saying. I do, he said. And I should have said it sooner. He reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A small, navy velvet box. My breath caught. I didn't just come here to visit. I came here because I was going to propose. Silence. He held the box without opening it. I wanted to ask your family's blessing before I asked for your hand. It felt like the right thing to do. But after everything I've seen, Clara's manipulation, Melissa's behavior, and how they made you feel like a stranger in your own story, I don't need their blessing. I need your truth. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them back. You were going to propose? Yes. I still want to, but not like this. Not in a house that tried to convince me you're not enough. Behind him, a soft sound, the creak of the stair. Clara. She stood there in her robe, arms crossed, lips thin. You shouldn't be speaking to her like that in this house, she said, cool and composed. No, David said, his voice rising slightly. What I shouldn't have done was let your quiet sabotage go unchecked. I read your chart. Her face barely flickered. Melissa and I share hobbies? Is that how you measure love now? Bullet points and wrist sizes? You're overreacting, she said. David stepped closer. No, ma'am, I'm responding. There's a difference. He turned back to me. Julia, I didn't fall in love with your job or your schedule or your neat pantry labels. I fell in love with you because you know who you are, even when people try to tell you otherwise. I closed my suitcase gently, zipped it shut, but I didn't pick it up. Clara stood there, frozen between power and consequence. David walked over and took my hand. You still want to leave? He asked softly. I looked at him, at his certainty, then past him, at Clara, now suddenly very small in the hallway light. Yes, I said, but not alone. The silence after my answer hung like a held breath, thick, delicate, and ready to collapse under its own weight. Clara stepped further into the room, her face composed, but her eyes, those unreadable, steel blue eyes, betrayed her. She wasn't in control anymore, and she knew it. I kept hold of David's hand, grounding myself in that one small certainty. I didn't mean to hurt you, Clara said at last, her voice brittle. That wasn't my intention. No, I said calmly, but it was your outcome. She winced, like the words cut deeper than she expected. Her hand went instinctively to her throat, to the place where the pearl clasp of her necklace always rested. She paused, breath catching. I see the way you keep everything together. You always have. Ever since your father left, you were the one who swept in and kept the life going. Like it was your job. I was 13, I said, the bitterness sharper than I wanted it to be. I know, Clara whispered, and I never apologized for that. She took another step forward. Watching you grow into someone so capable, so structured, it filled me with pride, but also fear, because you didn't leave space for anyone to care for you. Not really. And I thought maybe you wouldn't let anyone in, that you'd end up... She trailed off, tears gathering behind her lashes. Alone, I finished for her. Like you. She looked up at me sharply, but she didn't deny it. I thought David might need someone. Softer. Someone who wouldn't keep everything so tightly held. I blinked, the ache in my chest blooming. So you offered him Melissa? I asked, voice low. I didn't offer anyone, she said quickly, but then paused. I just let something unfold. And then, maybe I nudged. Melissa's footsteps creaked on the hallway floor behind her. She'd been listening. Of course she had. I didn't ask for this, Melissa said quietly, her voice small for the first time all weekend. I didn't plan anything. I thought he was kind. I turned toward her. You're always kind, Mel. You just forget who you're being kind to? She flinched, like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. I think I should go pack, she said, more to the floor than to us. And then, without another word, she turned and disappeared down the hall. No flounce, no grand exit, just a whisper of retreat. The door to her room clicked shut. Clara stayed still, fingers trembling now at her sides. I don't expect you to forgive me today, she said, but I do want you to know I see it now. What I did, what I risked. She turned to David. You love her? He nodded. I do. She closed her eyes. Then don't let her do what I did. Don't let fear shape the way she shows up in love. Let her be messy. Let her be loud. Let her forget things sometimes. I felt my throat close up. Give her room, Clara finished. She deserves that. I didn't know if that was an apology or a plea or both, but it was the first real thing she'd said to me in years. David's hand gripped mine tighter. And then Clara did something I never expected. She walked over to me, cupped my face in both hands, tender, trembling, and kissed my forehead. My blessing's always been yours, she whispered, and then she walked away. No more speeches, no parting manipulation, just silence. I stood there for a long time after she left, feeling the echo of that kiss on my skin. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was asking permission to live the life I wanted. I was already living it. Have you ever felt your family didn't see the real you? That they loved a version of you that fit their expectations, but not who you actually are? Tell me in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to know they're not alone. Because sometimes becoming who you are means breaking free from who they told you to be. Thank you for listening.